September 17, 2024, Beirut, Lebanon. Dawn. A pall of gray dust hangs over the city as the sun creeps above the horizon, painting shattered apartment blocks with ghostly light. In the narrow alleys of southern Beirut, the morning air is sharp with anticipation, a scent like electrical ozone drifting above the city's ancient stones. Somewhere between routine and survival, the street vendors arrange their wares, their radios crackling with anxious voices, oblivious to the tension humming beneath the day. Near a crumbling wall, an unassuming man in a faded jacket feels a sudden vibration inside his pocket. A pager. Its presence is familiar. A lifeline, a command post reduced to the palm of a hand. Around the city, thousands reach for identical devices, fingers brushing the plastic shells, eyes flickering with duty, fear, and hope. Above these silent rituals, surveillance drones glide, almost invisible. Their lenses blink, recording faces destined to vanish before sunset. At a Hezbollah logistics outpost, officers exchange coded glances, each wondering if today will be the day the city erupts. In the hills beyond, Israeli analysts monitor fluctuating signal patterns, every spike mapped and cross-referenced, ready for activation. As prayers echo from distant mosques, somewhere, someone gives the final go-ahead command. It's a moment measured in milliseconds, ordinary lives on the brink of catastrophe. The air itself feels heavy, charged with unspoken dread. Across Lebanon, thousands of hands grip pagers waiting. By the summer of 2024, the Middle East stood at the edge of escalation. Israel and Hezbollah, adversaries locked in cycles of confrontation since the 1980s, had resumed open hostilities after a year of relentless border skirmishes and shadow wars. The war in Gaza had reignited old alliances and resentments, driving Hezbollah to bolster its positions in Lebanon while seeking fresh channels of communication and supply. Hezbollah, once reliant on encrypted radio, runners, and satellite phones, had begun integrating modern commercial technology into its operational backbone. Pagers, sourced through complex international supply chains, became ubiquitous in its ranks. These Taiwan-made devices, traded through Hungarian and Lebanese importers, offered reliable silent messaging, a lifeline for frontline units and logistical planners. The pager became a trusted symbol, passed from agent to agent, shielded by faith in the security of their channels. In Tel Aviv, Mossad analysts watched with growing confidence. Decades of intelligence triumphs, from code-breaking in the Six-Day War to cunning operations against Iranian proxies, had convinced Israeli command that technological sabotage could yield new victories in the information battlespace. The circuits and chips of a 12-pager held possibilities far more explosive than any missile or drone. Throughout the first half of 2024, Israeli intelligence operations focused with laser-like precision on mapping the flow of pagers from Taiwan to Lebanon. Secret briefings and intercepted shipments led Mossad operatives down a rabbit hole of shell companies, corrupt customs officials, and masked couriers. Each link revealed another opportunity to intervene. The atmosphere in Lebanon was electric, tense. Every checkpoint, every radio message carried a hint of suspicion. Hezbollah's growing reliance on digital devices was both its strength and, as Mossad had calculated, its potential blind spot. In war rooms under Beirut and Jabal Amel, Hezbollah planners grappled with the possibility that their lifelines could become weapons, that the things they trusted most might betray them. The stage was set not only for combat, but for a technological coup in the heart of Lebanon, a calculated violation of trust, engineered in the microchips and plastic shells of anonymous pagers. And as September drew nearer, the plan took shape. The seeds of catastrophe sown as Hezbollah reached for ever more secure means in an increasingly perilous world. The global trade in electronics had always been messy, but by 2024, it was a full-fledged labyrinth. Mossad's cyber division had tracked the pagers from the factory floors of Taiwan, where assembly line workers soldered chips and packed tiny batteries into standard-issue black plastic. At first glance, the devices aroused no suspicion, one of millions exported to customers across Asia and Europe. But alongside ordinary bulk shipments, Israeli agents worked in silence. Through carefully orchestrated shell companies, cutouts in Hong Kong, and corrupted intermediaries in Budapest, Mossad's operatives subtly redirected batches of pagers, inserting payloads in transit. What followed was a feat of engineering audacity. In secure workshops under Tel Aviv and Haifa, Mossad technicians developed a microcharge no larger than a pen cap, incorporating custom detonators that could be weaponized remotely. Each altered pager would remain dormant, indistinguishable in appearance and function, until it received a coded signal pulsed through the wireless networks that crisscrossed Lebanon's urban sprawl. Getting the booby-trapped pagers into Hezbollah's logistical bloodstream required meticulous planning. Mossad's deep-cover agents coordinated monitored losses and thefts from international depots, staged intercepted deliveries, and bribed black-market traders. Each shipment was camouflaged within larger consignments destined for the ever-changing supply needs of southern Lebanon. There was no single convoy, no smoking gun transport, just a trickle, a slow invasion of explosive potential slipping through the cracks of commerce. Hezbollah, for all its intelligence and operational paranoia, could not check everything. The war's chaos meant units operated with patchy oversight. Commanders at the front begged for more pagers. The devices, reliable and cheap, became a hot commodity among battalions dispersed in villages and in Beirut's teeming Shia neighborhoods. Few suspected these new tools, a gift from distant Asian markets, might carry death. Beneath the surface, the psychological game intensified. Mossad seeded rumors about unreliable imports, bent Lebanese arms dealers to whisper doubts, and watched as Hezbollah redoubled security. But volume won out over vigilance. By the close of August 2024, over 5,000 pagers, each with its hidden secret, had taken root in Hezbollah's network. And so, in twilight safehouses, Israeli operatives waited, hands poised above keyboards, eyes on encrypted dashboards, knowing that Lebanon was now a landscape sown with invisible, patient danger. In the aftermath of technological warfare, humanity is always laid bare. Many of the pagers ended up in the hands of Hezbollah field operators, men who moved between duty and dread, carrying the hopes of their families and the weight of an endless struggle. Some pagers found their way into command posts, market stalls, and even civilian homes, traded on Lebanon's patchwork black markets. The line dividing fighter from non-combatant blurred, written in the anonymous digits of a pager's display. One survivor, barely 20, would later recall the moment before the blast. A routine beep, a message from an older brother fighting near the border. In a split second, the ordinary became catastrophic. Shoppers, office workers, and fighters fell together, united by the randomness of sabotage. Family grief poured over Beirut's hospitals, overburdened by the wounded from every walk of life. Each fragment of shrapnel told the same story. Technological innovation turned intimate object into lethal weapon, with little warning and no mercy. To sabotage at scale meant innovation. Mossad's technicians faced a challenge that went beyond conventional explosives: how to conceal destruction within a functional, everyday object, undetectable until the moment of activation. Custom detonators were engineered to be triggered remotely by encrypted signals. Binary data, pulsed through cell towers, synchronizing thousands of devices in a moment of calculated violence. The modified pagers passed every external inspection. Battery, receiver, and display all functioned perfectly, but beneath the circuit board, explosive microcharges and remote triggers melded into the essential circuitry. Mossad's own documentation would later boast that the pager was the perfect Trojan horse, an object trusted precisely because it seemed so ordinary. Hezbollah's engineers scrambled for explanations amid the carnage, dissecting casing after casing and finding the same silent, ingenious mechanism. In the war of technology, every edge was momentary. Mossad had proved that operational trust, once broken, left nothing untouched but the ruins of a tool once seen as lifeline. Strategy at Mossad's Tel Aviv headquarters ran on precision and patience. Months before the first explosion, analysts and field officers charted pagan flows, mapped the social networks of Hezbollah logistics, and steered their counterfeit pagers into key distribution nodes. It was a campaign built on details: shipping manifests, telephone calls, black market gossip. Activating the booby-trapped pagers required perfect timing. Every device would be triggered in rapid succession, producing mass confusion, terror, and operational breakdown. Selection of the moment for detonation was ruthless. Mossad waited for periods when Hezbollah units would be spread thin but reliant on rapid communication. On September 17th, that balance tipped. In the hours leading up to the blasts, Hezbollah's leaders had issued urgent directives and the pagers buzzed across the organization's ranks, a synchrony Mossad exploited with chilling effectiveness. For Hezbollah's inner circle, the disaster was as much psychological as physical. Hassan Nasrallah, watching the aftermath from his secure communications bunker, faced a sudden battle on multiple fronts. The chain of trust so vital for any fighting force had been severed by invisible hands. Leaders struggled to explain the disaster to their followers and account for communications failures. Iran's advisors, both present and remote, urged caution and demanded retaliatory logic. On the Israeli side, Mossad's director and key commanders faced their own crucible. Success here meant not only inflicting losses, but demonstrating Israel's reach in technological warfare, a lesson to all regional enemies. Orders in Tel Aviv were issued with clinical calm, and each report from Beirut was measured against the calculated risk of escalation. Leadership in that moment was the art of managing fallout, political, tactical, and moral, without losing the thread of advantage. Across Lebanon, civilians and opposition officials reeled from the chaos. Iranian media decried the attack as an act of technological terrorism. Human rights organizations rattled off casualty figures, while Lebanese security agencies scrambled to trace the source of the deadly devices. Neighboring states watched and worried, assessing their own vulnerabilities. For Hezbollah, the lesson was immediate and brutal. Objects once trusted could no longer be relied upon, and every imported electronic device, pager, radio, mobile, now arrived with suspicion shadowing its utility. The enemy's perspective was muddled in grief, anger, and sudden uncertainty. Global reaction was swift and fractured. International law experts debated the legality of remote detonated commercial devices, weighing Israel's right to self-defense against the principle of civilian protection. Human Rights Watch condemned the operation, citing indiscriminate destruction and harm to innocents. Elected officials from Europe and the U.S. called for investigations. Israel, for its part, issued no official statement, fueling speculation and outrage in equal measure. In war's fog, moral ambiguity reigned. Each side justified its actions on grounds of necessity, survival, and preemption, leaving only the victims to anchor the debate in sorrow and unanswered questions. It began at 07:41 a.m., a moment that splintered Lebanon's calm into chaos. In a crowded marketplace outside Tyre, a sudden, unnatural silence seemed to fall, a collective inhalation. Seconds later, a sharp metallic click in dozens of pockets, offices, and safe houses across the region preluded catastrophe. The pagers detonated almost simultaneously. The first explosion was small, sharp, almost unremarkable amid the usual morning noise. But it was followed by another, and then another, rippling through cities and villages at the speed of radio waves. In less than 1 minute, more than 60 blasts echoed from Beirut's Shia quarters to Nabatea, Sidon, and as far north as Baalbek. At a Hezbollah logistics office, a young operator, eyes barely adjusting to the screens after sleepless nights, was thrown back by a burst of glass and searing heat. His hand, reaching instinctively for the pager, was sheared away with the impact. On the street below, an elderly vendor collapsed in his stall, his pager still ticking out static. In an apartment block near the airport, a mother's call was forever silenced, her home reduced to cinders. Scenes of horror played out in parallel, stitched together by an invisible logic, a code sent by a distant hand. Israeli analysts in Tel Aviv monitored encrypted dashboards, mapping the flashes of destruction in real time. Calm voices marked each detonation, recording burst patterns, signal loss, and chaos. Journalists raced to the scenes, broadcasting chilling fragments, the mangled remains of once ordinary devices, the rising, keening chorus of grief. Hospitals were deluged with casualties, fighters, children, shopkeepers, all marked by the fingerprints of technological sabotage. Hezbollah's leadership scrambled for answers amid a digital blackout, barking orders into radios and mobile phones that now seemed menacing in their own right. Each blast sowed more than physical destruction. It struck at the very core of trust, splintering command and morale. As the news spread, panic erupted across Lebanon. Pagers, once essential, were smashed and abandoned in the streets, symbols of betrayal and terror. Yet amid the destruction, no single face could be blamed. The hand behind the attack was invisible, its touch everywhere and nowhere. In the minutes that followed, chaos metastasized. Hezbollah's internal communications fractured. Reports of explosions, missing operatives, and sudden silence ricocheted up the hierarchy. In safe houses from Beirut to Hermel, commanders clutched radios, voices ragged with disbelief. Some assumed initial sabotage, others suspected Israeli missile strikes. Few imagined the destruction could come from the trusted pagers in their own hands. Across the border, Mossad's operations center pulsed with tension and triumph. High-resolution satellite feeds showed smoke rising in dozens of Lebanese locales. On their encrypted networks, reports tallied in. More than 100 high-value targets eliminated in under 5 minutes. Dozens more wounded. Israeli leaders, observing from secure bunkers, exchanged terse acknowledgments. No public claim, no admission. Just grim, silent recognition that a new line in covert warfare had been crossed. Meanwhile, Hezbollah's counterintelligence teams launched frenzied investigations. By midday, field agents scoured remaining devices, dismantling casings and finding micro-wired charges nestled beside batteries. Suspicion darkened every import, every piece of tech sourced from outside Lebanon. Loyalty and paranoia walked hand in hand. Some units went off-grid entirely, fearing that any connection, any beep, any burst of static, could be fatal. International media scrambled for clarity. Newsrooms as far as New York and Paris aired raw, shocking footage of Beirut's aftermath. Burned-out vehicles, shattered schools, hospital corridors jammed with wounded. Human rights organizations tallied casualties. Estimates ranged from 240 to over 300 killed, hundreds more injured. With each hour, the scale of the attack, its planning, its reach, became clearer and more terrifying. Within 24 hours, Hezbollah's leadership ordered the discontinuation of all pager communications. The party's chief, Hassan Nasrallah, appeared by video, voice gravely measured, denouncing the machinery of death injected into our very hands. His fury was matched by uncertainty. How many more devices were out there, ticking, still unactivated? Outside Lebanon, regional actors took note. Iranian officials issued warnings, hinting at retaliation. Arab League diplomats convened an emergency meeting. United Nations agencies called for immediate investigations. In Israel, the silence from government spokespeople was total. As fear swept through the ranks, pagers were abandoned, burned, or destroyed. Lines of trust evaporated in the ashes of shattered plastic and metal. For a moment, the tools of modern warfare had become agents of terror, turning Hezbollah's strength, its networked coordination, against itself. From this point, nothing about communications or logistics in the Lebanese theater would ever be the same. The war had entered a new, invisible phase. The hours following the pager detonations brought a wave of agony and confusion. Lebanon's emergency response infrastructure strained under the sudden influx of wounded. Over 600 injured flooded Beirut's hospitals alone, filling corridors and waiting rooms with the noise of grief. Medical workers, eyes stinging from smoke and exhaustion, tried to distinguish fighters from civilians, victims from survivors, piecing together the shattered stories behind each wound. The dead were counted in hundreds. Among them were experienced Hezbollah commanders, logistics coordinators, and young recruits, but also children clutching schoolbooks, elderly vendors swept up in the chaos, and mothers gathering supplies for their families. The randomness of the devastation sent fear rippling throughout communities. No one was spared by circumstance or role. Funerals in Beirut and Tyre transformed into public protests. Crowds demanded answers. waving battered remnants of pagers as grim symbols of betrayal. Ordinary Lebanese families, already living on the edge amidst economic collapse and frequent violence, now faced a new and intimate terror. The realization that the lifelines they trusted could be engineering their destruction. Hezbollah, battered yet defiant, quickly shifted tactics. Technological sweeps targeted every radio, phone, and imported device. Communications reverted overnight to runner couriers, encrypted hand signals, and clandestine messages passed in person. Trust, once woven through a network of machines, now frayed and retreated to flesh and whispered word. Intelligence officers worked round the clock, compiling forensic analyses, collecting device fragments and cataloging the blast sites by GPS and digital archive. In Israeli circles, word of the operation leaked slowly. Mossad field agents received encrypted commendations, a job regarded officially as a strategic success. Internal memoranda circulated, tracking causalities, psychological impact, and Hezbollah's shifting battlefield posture. For Israeli decision-makers, the operation was proof of reach and cunning, yet discussions about moral cost and escalation simmered beneath the official silence. Through all this, fear lingered. Every pager that hadn't detonated felt like another loaded gun. The blood-stained devices became cursed objects, abandoned in piles, buried or burned, marking the end of an era in Lebanese communications. As the smoke cleared and the funerals multiplied, the weight of consequence settled over Lebanon and beyond. Hezbollah's leadership realized that trust, so painstakingly cultivated in years of underground struggle, had been shattered along the thin line separating asset from threat. With their communications grid ruptured, local commanders reverted to primitive methods, creating bottlenecks and delays at all levels. The loss of dozens of mid-level officers in one blow crippled several operations and sent rivals scrambling to fill the vacuum. For Lebanese authorities and international observers, the incident marked a turning point. The Ministry of Public Health, scrambling to respond, released grim statistics: hundreds dead, over 1,000 injured. Human rights monitors described scenes of indiscriminate harm, noting that bombed pagers had passed through markets, homes, and schools before detonation. Investigators from the United Nations and the International Committee of the Red Cross arrived within days, documenting blast sites and collecting testimonies. The question of accountability, military necessity versus civilian safety, echoed in government halls and on international airwaves. Across the region, Allied militias and regimes studied the operation with a mixture of awe and dread. Iran's military advisors warned all proxy groups against over-reliance on foreign-sourced electronics and initiated major counterintelligence sweeps. In countries wary of Israeli intelligence reach, Yemen, Iraq, Syria, routine electronic audits became the new normal. The shockwaves, both technological and psychological, reshaped the balance of covert power across the Middle East. In Israel, official silence gave way to debate. Intelligence and security analysts boasted of a paradigm shift, arguing that the operation had proven modern conflict would be won as much by hacking trust as by breaking lines. But critics within Israel and abroad raised fierce ethical questions. International law experts weighed in, arguing that deliberately targeting civilian infrastructure, even with the aim of crippling enemy command, pushed the boundaries of warfare and morality to their breaking point. Families in Beirut, Tyre, and Baalbek mourned. Each destroyed pager became a story, a caution, a reminder of how easily ordinary life could be weaponized. Doctors and psychologists warned of a coming wave of trauma, a population scarred not just by violence, but by the loss of trust in the tools of modern existence. The political climate, already volatile, tipped towards anger and suspicion. Hezbollah promised retaliation, at a time and place of our choosing. Israeli military and political leadership braced for a protracted game of escalation, knowing that in war's theater of surprises, yesterday's innovation is tomorrow's old news. But from the wreckage, a harsh lesson emerged. In the wars of this new era, every connection and every touchpoint, no matter how mundane, could become the front line. In the suffocating silence after the explosions, Lebanon counted its losses, a reckoning not just of bodies and buildings but of trust itself. For generations, communication devices had bridged the gaps carved by war and hardship. A pager was more than a tool, it was a lifeline. With one operation, that comfort was extinguished. Mossad's unprecedented campaign didn't simply reshape tactics. It rewrote the emotional contract between technology and trust in every war zone. The consequences transcended physical destruction. Civilians and fighters alike learned to fear the ordinary, to doubt what once seemed benign. Hezbollah's doctrine, built on secrecy, loyalty, and the careful balancing act of survival, faced a world where every tool could be turned traitor. Israel's intelligence communities, too, acknowledged a new frontier in technological sabotage. Power came with the price of uncertainty, and victory was shadowed by the memory of human cost. Across the region, combatants and civilians re-examined daily rituals. Devices were smashed, conversations were cloaked in suspicion, and the very pulse of modern life slowed to a wary rhythm. In this landscape, warfare was no longer only about soldiers and guns. It was a contest of faith in the networks and objects that thread each life together. History will record September 17, 2024, not merely as a day of violence, but as a chapter in the evolving playbook of modern conflict. Here, the war leapfrogged past barricades and borders, finding its battleground inside pockets and palms, in hospital wards and empty apartments. The question, lingering long after the debris has been cleared, what happens when trust itself becomes the casualty?